So next up, we have our first thought leadership panel of the day, sponsored by leading international mining consultancy, SRK. I'm really excited about this topic, which is what if mining was cool? I will introduce the moderator of the panel, Gary Poxleitner, who will explain more. Gary Poxleitner is a principal mining engineer and practice leader at SRK's Sudbury office. He has 30 years of underground mine engineering experience, including technical support, M&A, due diligence, audits, mine cost estimation, mine process optimization, and operational improvement. Gary has worked with almost every extractable commodity, from near surface to ultra deep producing mines in over 45 nations and on every continent. Gary serves on several boards, including with SRK Consulting, CIM, and Camiro, and he's also on CMJ's advisory board. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me okay.
Can hear you. Are you going to be able to turn your camera on, or will it be off?
I think I have it turned on.
There just seems to be something blocking your camera there, Gary. I'm not sure if it's a cover over the camera screen.
I see something there.
See your finger.
Oh yeah. Funny how this technical problems happen sometimes.
No worries at all. That's why we're a fully live virtual event. It does happen the odd time, and we're all good. But you know what, Gary, we can hear you perfectly clear. So even if you want to just start and introduce your panel members, we can go from there.
Yeah, I'll do that. Oh, there
we go. We can see you now.
Awesome. Thank you everyone for your patience. I'm really excited to thank you for the wonderful introduction, and happy to be on the CMJ panel as well. Yeah, really excited about this topic. And I'd like to just, we have a panel of 3 individuals, and basically what we want to do today is just have a discussion together just about the coolness of mining. And of course, we know that there is indeed a pressure in the mining industry to be lower impact on the environment, and still to deliver metals and minerals to support the world in which we live in by being innovative and creative and sustainable, to use advanced technology and to improve our communities, and be respectful, of course, to the indigenous people, and create sort of high-tech jobs. And that's what we mean by cool. I mean, who doesn't want to be a part of that? So I think mining is pretty cool. But the perception in the world, as we know, not everybody sort of thinks of mining really as that cool. And that's kind of what we want to talk about today, is kind of understanding how people see mining in the industry and how we see it, and kind of closing those gaps, I think. So with me in the discussion is Siri, Daniella, and Erin, Bobicki, Siri, Genik. And I'm really honored to have them. They're industry leaders in the mining community, and they're going to share with me this discussion. And what I'd like to do, Daniella and Erin and Siri, is for you to just give a brief introduction of yourself. I'm not going to introduce you. What I'd like you to do is introduce yourself. Introduce yourself in the context of how you got into mining. What kind of drawn you in there? So I'll just give one little extra introduction of myself while you guys sort of think about it. For me, my parents were immigrants from Europe. They came to Canada. When they came to Canada, they did some pay off the boat ride, basically working in the forests as lumberjacks, but they got into mining in Northern Ontario. So I personally grew up in the mining industry, in the shadows of the head frames, and mining was all around me. And it was a natural progression for me to go into geology and then mining engineering, and doing a career in operations, and then sharing that knowledge to the industry as a consultant. But Daniella, let's start with you, if you don't mind. Share with us a little bit of an introduction of yourself and what got you into mining, if you may.
Sure. Thanks, Gary. And my folks are also from Europe. I was born in Romania, and I certainly did not think I would end up in mining. I always wanted to be a lawyer. My aunt had been a lawyer back in Romania, so that was the path that I was on and actually started on. I spent a few years in financial services after practicing law. And then just at the tail end of the financial crisis, I found myself between opportunities. And a gentleman that I had gotten to know during my time as a lawyer reached out to me and asked for some support. He was going through an M&A situation and in the mining industry, and asked me to come in and help them on that front. So it was a different industry, but something that I was familiar with from the perspective of M&A activities. That was at the end of 2008, and I've been in it ever since. So I didn't walk into the industry on purpose, but certainly it hooked me, and here I am a number of years later.
Welcome aboard. That's awesome. Erin, same question, kind of a brief introduction of yourself, kind of what you're doing now, and what got you into mining anyway?
Oh, there we go. Sure. Nice to be here, Gary. Thanks, and nice to see you, Daniella and Siri. My name's Erin Bobicki. I'm a professor at the University of Alberta. I was previously at the University of Toronto. I'm still associate with the University of Toronto, and I specialize in mineral processing. Growing up, I had very little exposure to mining. My family is from the Okanagan, from BC, largely in farming, orcharding. My dad and uncle, had sometimes some experience working in the mines as laborers, but it wasn't a big thing. I actually didn't know what engineering was until I went to university. In science, I was good at science and math. I was encouraged to be a doctor. Decided that wasn't quite the right path for me, but I was always actually an ardent environmentalist, writing poems about the environment from a very young age and that kind of thing. And when I got to university, there was a program offered in environmental engineering. That's perfect. I can solve environmental problems. And so my undergraduate degree is in environmental engineering. And I only took one course in mining actually as an undergrad. Marcelo Vega at UBC, great guy, was the prof. And I told him at the time I would never work in mining. Keep in mind, this is 20 years ago. And because my perception was that the industry had a terrible environmental track record. And I also felt that the attitude of the mining students at the time was very cavalier to what I viewed as, environmental atrocities that were occurring at the time. However, looking to finish, I was contacted by a recruiter from INCO to come to an interview in Toronto, and I'd never been east of Alberta, and thought this sounds like a really exciting trip. And it was a 2-day interview, and a lot of effort put into that by the folks at INCO. And I was convinced over those 2 days by some senior executives that I could make a real difference in the industry by working from inside. And, those conversations have stuck with me to this day and guide the work that I do. So even after, going back to school, so I worked in industry for a number of years, went back to school, did my PhD. I left and worked in high tech for a couple of years. I came back to mining because I feel like this is where I can make a real impact.
And you certainly have. Thank you very much, Erin. Siri, same question to you. A little brief introduction of who you are in mining.
So it's great to see Erin again, Daniella. Thanks, Gary. So a bit like yourself and Daniella, from Eastern Europe, my family comes from the Ukraine. Background that goes all the way back to a little girl. My dad was in the oil and gas business, sorry. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And we traveled around the world from very, very, very small and just saw a whole bunch of different parts of the world. And I just love that, thinking that oil and gas and traveling went together. And my dad was a geologist, so we would often go on road trips in different parts of the world and go through sand dunes or tunnels or rocks or mountains And my dad would explain how old the world was and how cool these rocks were. And that's where the dinosaurs were. And we'd go fishing. And so everything was cool. Not really understanding the footprint. And grew up, and to my parents' great desperation, I also became a lawyer, not a geoscientist, and started my career as well, practice. And my challenge was the industry I found was just a little too black and white, and I couldn't travel anymore. So I needed to find an industry where I could go back and travel the world and work with different people and communities. And so that's how I fell into mining. I joined an engineering company. And again, I'm a little bit like Erin at the time, didn't know anything, no geotechnical background. And the rest is history, traveled the world again, worked on projects from the ground up, different size of companies, majors, mid-tiers, and then had the opportunity to bring together all of these skills and experience and build my own business, which is Bridge, and help mining organizations integrate sustainability strategies with their business models to deliver good shareholder value and great stakeholder involvement, and keeping footprints as reasonably reduced as possible in the coolest fashion ever.
Always cool. Thank
It
you.
is
Thank you.
cool, man.
So guys and ladies and gentlemen, so when September being the year that we drop our children off to university, I did that in September. So I took my 18-year-old son, I drove him to Southern Ontario from Northern Ontario, and dropped him off to university studying mechanical engineering. And on our drive there, and while he was setting up in residence, I was speaking to him and some of his friends, and we talked about the coolness of mining, which kind of got us thinking about this topic today. And from that discussion, what's interesting, and the reason I share about my connection with mining is my children grew up in a home. Both my wife and I, we work in the mining industry. We live in a mining community. And we were talking about mining, and his perception, he was looking at studying maybe mining engineering, but he chose mechanical engineering because I don't know if he really thinks mining is all that cool. So during our discussion, in his point of view, is that mining isn't maybe not all that clean. That we talk about innovation, but are we 2 steps back from the Teslas and the aerospace industry of the world? He was saying that a lot of his friends are more interested in aerospace or automotive than they are in mining. So maybe not as technically advanced as we say, maybe not working with communities, indigenous people as we think we are. And those are his perceptions, and the perceptions, I think, of those in the industry, the people that we want to attract in the industry. And so my question then for the panel, and again, there's going to be a question and answer period at the end too, so please just post everybody online, just feel free to ask some questions that kind of prop your interest as well. But the question that I'd like to ask you, dear panelists, is mining really cool? Like, that's the first one. So are we fooling ourselves, or is it really as cool as we may think it is? And maybe you don't think it's that cool. I'd like to hear from you. And Siri, I'd like to start with you this time, if you may. Just, is mining cool? What do you think?
Ask William Shatner.
What does he say?
And it is really cool. I think, obviously, I don't know that any one of us around this call would be here if it wasn't cool. And like I said early on, and the words were chosen, my dad, instilled that, and anybody who knows me knows that my family is important. But at the same time, growing up in different places, we saw the impact of some of the oil and gas industry. We didn't do a good job. We've made mistakes. We need to accept that, be open and transparent about it, vulnerable, but we also need to change the dialogue and we need to dare to be different. So I don't know who's around our call, but we're probably not talking to the right people, because we're talking to the converted. We're preaching to our industry. We're talking to people who know us, understand us, and believe that this is good. We need to broaden the message. We need to better market it. If your son or whomever, or my nieces and nephews, don't think mining is cool, it's because they don't understand the impact that mining does have and the differences that we're making. This is not the pick and shovel industry anymore. This is not the old white men industry. To wit, you've got 3 women around the screen. This is your kids' industry. This is to build that Tesla, to build that rocket, to build what's in a surgery hospital, to build the wind turbines, the solar panels. You need to source minerals. There's no magic to it, unfortunately. Do we need to do it better and differently? You bet we definitely do. No miner's mouth. So we need to also talk about it. Like I said, we share it amongst ourselves through our conventions, our conferences. We want to do better. We are doing better. But you know, I Googled technology in mining and cool stuff. Lucara and Ira Thomas, diamonds, what they're doing, bringing XRT technology to sort diamonds without having to involve more mechanical concerns. Barrett commissioning photon assay laboratories. I mean, I can't even pronounce it. Canada investing millions into semi. And it goes on and it goes on. Gold spot and using AI for exploration. But we don't talk, we tell each other how good we're doing, but do we tell that story and how all the value chain fits together?
Yeah, and I'd like to explore that a little bit more later in our conversation. Just what do we tell? What conversations should we have with everybody? So Danielle, so Siri was interesting. Like she said that there's diversity because we have of course mostly women here on the panel. Was that selected? Did we select that deliberately to give that perception? Is there really diversity in the mining business, and is mining cool as well? What do you think?
Maybe I'll start with the cool part. I think we're getting cooler. I'm not sure that I would consider us to be on the leading edge of cool on that front, and I say that, you know, for a number of reasons. One of them is, I think certainly in the last number of years, so let's say 5+ years, we have as an industry made great investments in technology. Certainly the majors have done so. I think that's starting to flow down to the intermediates, and I think that appreciation of what technology can bring from an operating cost perspective, as our mines get deeper and the grades get lower and the low-hanging fruit is picked, it is starting to be more and more important. But I think we're far from being as technologically advanced as a number of other industries. And I'll give you a stat I read, I believe in May of this year, relating to autonomous haulage. And it was a press release from CAT talking about their achievements and the autonomous system being implemented at 17 mines with over 400 AMTs operating, 8+ years operation, and 9 different owners of those 17 mines. That's not a lot. That's not a lot of owners. That's not a lot of mines. And 8+ years is, you know, is a good track record. But when you think about some of the other technologies in other industries and how long they have been around, I think we're talking for more than 8 years. So certainly there hasn't been sufficient runway for the work that we have been doing in technology as an industry, from autonomous systems to the uses of drones for safety, for environment, for overall management of production. Some of the AI, I think that some of the majors have implemented around supply chain management and inventory predictability. I think those are fairly new in our industry. And I think that overall, and I've spent a few years in the capital markets as a banker, I think overall, when you hear that someone is using a new technology, there's certainly more concern around the risk of that versus when someone says, gee, you know, I'm using this processing methodology that has been in use for 50 plus years. There's a certain degree of comfort that actually comes along with that. I can tell you, we're building a new mine in Northern Ontario, Côté Gold, and we're implementing the autonomous systems. And we're working through some ways of explaining to our stakeholders the rationale and how we're managing that and how we're working through the risks and so on. So I think even within our own industry, there's some ways to go around you know, that acceptability of technology and how truly that has penetrated our industry. So I think we're progressing on that front from a cool perspective. In terms of the diversity of the industry, I think we are becoming more diverse. And I think that conversation of diversity and inclusion has certainly been escalated, not just in our industry, but in other industries that have had predominantly a certain look and feel to them. And that's been progressing at an accelerated pace as a result, and particularly I think more so in the last 18 months than even before, since the start of the pandemic. And I think that is something that is, you know, accelerating. And I don't just mean from a gender diversity perspective, but overall diversity. I can tell you when I entered the industry in 2009, I'm not an engineer or a geologist. As I mentioned, I'm a lawyer and I've got a finance background as well. I found it difficult, at least in my first few years, to navigate through the industry because I was not an engineer and I was not a geologist. And I think that those skill sets and capabilities and training are extremely important in an industry such as ours, that, you know, where the technical aspects of the industry do matter. However, there are other aspects of our industry, such as supply chain, such as environment, health, safety, et cetera, where we can draw from other industries that have been doing it you know, alongside with us on that front. You know, I can think of the automotive industry where supply chain is incredibly important in the management of that. I can think of some of the retail industries where, again, operate on zero or on very thin margins, where management of the supply chain is important. Obviously, the chemicals industry, DuPont is a leading industry giant on the health and safety side, and so certainly I think there's other talent that we can draw from other industries and attract them to this industry, and I think that we can learn from other industries by attracting, you know, diverse talent with different background.
Thank you, Daniella. Oh, that's
I do
awesome.
see that changing though.
Yeah. Okay. Good. And what's interesting with Erin is, I mean, she's right there on the front lines with the students coming in, and we're talking about sort of that generation going into mining. And Erin, you see the young people and their perception and why they got into mining, which I'd like to talk about maybe a little in a few minutes. But is mining cool? Do you think it's cool? You must, but why? And yeah, maybe in some comments of what you've heard so far.
Sure. No, it's been a great discussion. I mean, I'm here. I think mining is super cool. I come at it from a bit of a different perspective. I mean, I'm, you know, a super dork. I'm a nerd. I like the really technical challenges that we're facing in this industry, right? So, and for me, it comes back to impact. I mean, in how many industries do you have an opportunity to have, such an impact on the everyday lives of virtually everyone on the planet? I mean, let's look at the challenges facing humanity today. So the pandemic is front and center. I actually have many mining colleagues working on pandemic work right now because the science is directly applicable. But let's think about climate change. So in the introduction, there was a mention of a panel on decarbonization later this afternoon, right? So how are we going to achieve decarbonization? Well, through electrification, adoption of low carbon fuels such as hydrogen. These are some of the, the main solutions. We hear about the net zero economy every day. Where are we going to get the commodities, the copper, the nickel, the cobalt, the graphite, the rare earths to achieve decarbonization? And as an industry in mining, we have the key, right? But we don't necessarily have all the solutions, right? So this is for me is the ticket. It's not look at all the great things we're doing. It's look at the opportunity. Look at the challenges. Siri mentioned, we haven't done things the best way always. We're doing our best now, but there's a lot of things that we don't know, right? There's an opportunity for young people to come in with new ideas and change this industry. And I mean, change the course of humanity, to be quite frank. I mean, that sounds dramatic, but let's think about this. The extraction of metals consumes 15% of global energy. If you can change that by just a little bit, you can have a dramatic impact on global CO2 emissions, climate change. If you can reduce the amount of tailings produced, if you can increase the efficiency of extraction by just 1%, that sounds like a small amount, but the impacts are absolutely massive. So to me, that's a great opportunity. I mean, young people, they look at Apple, they look at Tesla, they look at Google. Like, you can go work in a cool office, but are you going to be able to change the lives of everybody on the planet the way that you can in mining? I'm not sure. So, my message would be, in my view, if you want to save the world, you should work in mining, but it doesn't mean you have to be a mining engineer, right? So, talked about being lawyers, but you can be a mechanical engineer. You can be an electrical engineer. You can be in HR. You can be a special in, building relationships with communities, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. So there's a lot of different ways that you can be involved. And I think this is actually the ticket, for us to try to attract people from different backgrounds with different ways of thinking to revitalize and change the culture of this industry. So I think it's super cool. I know I'm jumping ahead to Gary, but you want to talk about how it's perceived. I think that's part of the trick, is to change how it's perceived. Yeah. But there's a lot of opportunity here. And so that's my view.
Yeah, no, thank you. So Siri, so there's obviously some sort of disconnect then from what mining is doing, even though, like what we've talked about, we're somewhat behind some of the other industries, but huge opportunities. What would you say, Siri, is a way, how would we communicate that? Like, a lot of people who are listening today, we are the converter, like we believe, okay, yes, mining is cool. But what do we say to somebody like my son, or nephews and nieces, or friends, or somebody that we're biking down a path and we see someone on the side and they say, what do you do? And we say, we're in mining, and they roll their eyes. What do we say to them? To
send them to Erin's classroom. I'm going back to school.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's certainly one answer, and I think one piece, mining is fantastic. We know that, we drank the Kool-Aid. We have to stop navel gazing and pull out. So to Erin and Daniella's point, what makes the Tesla cool is that it's different and it's funky, and it's, it's all over social media. So we talked earlier a bit about the marketing of the industry, but I'd like you to suggest that we zoom out even further and we understand the full value chain, that where this critical mineral or this metal comes from pit to product. So what goes into that Tesla, or to that rocket, or to that hydrogen tank, from concept to consumer, so people understand that it's not just a hole in the ground, but it involves strong supply chains, logistics. I mean, it has negative and positive. And if we don't understand the full picture, picking on one little piece won't make the difference. So we have to explain it in such a way that not only the bankers understand it or the next quarter results that go out. We have to talk to those other people, not just the kids, but the world. And I saw a question that said, well, would there be like a movie actor, an influencer, something? And I'm like, no, it's more about taking the message, making it simple and transparent, and helping people understand. Because everybody has a smartphone. We're all on Zoom, and I assume we're all on screens. Well, unfortunately, you can't manufacture 2/3 of what goes into those. I mean, you can put all the components together for sure, but as Erin mentioned, so we have, but beyond the technology, toys, hospitals, saving, it's the messaging.
No, thank you, Siri. That's really good.
One thing I do want to add, and I know you've got more time, but just recently we had a very bad image of, I think it was 37 miners that were caught in a mine in Sudbury. And everybody was all over, and it was drama, and it was horrible. There was not one single media coverage about how successful that rescue was, how well that mining company, now Vale, did to make sure that everybody came out safe, and every single miner that was interviewed, and they all came out, they all went home safe, said it went really well. There were refuges, there was water, we were warm enough or cool enough, we could breathe. People who had a problem getting out were helped. Where is that message?
So Danielle,
I'll leave you with that, but it was an awesome rescue. And
Danielle, so like
you.
Daniel, where was that message, and how do we communicate stuff like Siri was sharing to people to kind of change the perception? Danielle, what do you think?
I very much agree with Siri, and to build on what she's saying, I think we've got to come at it from a number of angles. Number one, it's got to start in high schools and maybe even earlier to change those perceptions that we're doing our part. I think that with the increase in overall focus on ESG, which for our industry is just part of what we do and who we are. It's part of our values, the focus on health, on safety, on the environment. We've always talked about the social license to operate and what we do in order to achieve that and maintain it. That's now talked about in other industries and in most other industries, not just in our own. And stakeholders, not just community stakeholders, but also shareholders are now expecting to be having those discussions, whereas dial the clock back even a year and a half ago, maybe just a little bit longer, if you walked into a meeting and wanted to, with an investor or a potential investor, and wanted to talk about your health and safety and environment statistics, that was something that more existed in the appendix than a discussion that you would actually start the meeting with. So I think part of it is that we've got to continue to put out the message, start earlier. I think the world around us is also changing, and those conversations actually are becoming much more important, not just in our industry, but around the world in other industries. And therefore, what we have been doing is coming more to the forefront and is being recognized for the value that we're adding in communities as a whole. I think one of the other thoughts with all of this continued movement is our contribution and participation with discussion leaders in other industries, whether that's part of the World Economic Forum, whether that's part of other platform where these discussions are taking place. A lot has been written about the Business Roundtable, which is a group of almost 200 CEOs in the United States that have been a signatory to a different definition of a corporation, and one that has as its purpose serving stakeholders, not just shareholders, which has been a definition that's been around for tens of years. Now, there are not a lot of mining companies that are actually headquartered in the US to necessarily have more than the one or two that were part of the 200. But that's just something, again, as an example where we can raise our profile and what we're doing and our participation in in society and raising raising awareness on that front. People have talked about Unilever for quite a number of years around how they put purpose at the forefront on that front, and they've received a lot of knocks from institutional shareholders over the years, but they were at the leading edge. And in, at Harvard Business School, you'll talk about Unilever, but you might not necessarily talk about what countless of mining companies have actually done. So I think the messaging that Siri talked about, coming at it from different perspectives and different target audiences is something that definitely I think we could continue to work on.
Oh, thanks, Daniella. Very good response. Appreciate your comments, Erin. I mean, you work in the university. Are students dying to get into mining and metallurgy in the industry? Do they is it their first choice when they finish grade 12 to click on the metallurgical engineering box, geology, or is God forbid that it's just the last resort? Or what are you finding? Do people think it's kind of cool, and what do we tell them to show them that? What do you think? What are you finding?
Yeah, for some people it is the first choice, but oftentimes it's not. And it's whether it's the first choice or the third choice tends to be very cyclical. It very much follows the commodity market and whether or not the mining companies are hiring. So, for example, my experience at UBC as a student was that department would be very big when there were lots of jobs and students were making huge money coming out of school and there was lots of opportunity. And then as the commodity price fell off, then enrollment would plummet. And I think this is a big problem for us as an industry and trying to keep young people in the pipeline, is that we haven't developed a solution to consistently hire and to consistently create good opportunities for young people. I think one of the challenges as well is we go through these cycles of hiring, and then we lay off all of the young talent that we've brought into the industry. And we've done this over and over and over again. And it's a little bit discouraging to young people. So I don't want to, paint a totally negative view, but I mean, how do we get young people industry? I think, Daniella, you talked about high schools. I think it has to be earlier than that. I've had the experience with my eldest daughter when she was in grade 4, coming home with a worksheet talking about how dangerous mining was. This was in Ontario. Oh my God. And, so if this is what we're telling the young people, of course, they're not picking mining engineering as their first choice, or, they're going to work in again, you don't have to be in mining engineering. You could go into AI and robotics and still work in mining. There's lots of different applications, but we do need to change the bigger messaging. And I don't think that's easy, but there was a time, I love historical metallurgy. For anybody who knows me, I've been involved. There was a time when everybody knew that mining and metallurgy was cool and, was used to build cities and to, bring society in advance to the future. So how do we get back that? And I think, Siri's point, the media always focuses on the negative. We need to get out there and tell our stories. But we also need to bring young people in and keep them in and create opportunities. There was a question in the chat about, there are those of us have the passion but don't have the background. How do we get in? We need to create opportunities in the industry for people that are out there. We need to change the way that we're recruiting people. If you put up a position for a mining engineer and you don't go out and directly recruit, you're going to get kind of a specific type of applicant that is the kind of person that applies to a job posting that they see online. You're not going to get diversity. You're not going to get people with different backgrounds. You need to actively go out and recruit. And I go back and forth in my mind about, how do you create exciting opportunities for young people in the industry? So there was a time where we had these awesome corporate research centers doing tons of cool stuff, developing, end use products and different things. And we've really moved away from that. Mining companies have focused on, getting close to the face and to production. So, when I worked at Intel, we had, an army of 5,000 young PhDs fresh out of school. This was a very vibrant place to work. It was well paying. People wanted to be there. Right now, we don't have a lot of opportunities for grads. Yep.
I just want to, I'm going to ask Danielle, just on that note, and a really good question on here as well is, and just from what you said too, because it branches in the corporate, or somebody had asked, can we engage like employers that work in a mining company and their families like mine are disconnected a little bit from the mining industry? Is there something that the mining industry can do, operations, to engage them and to train them? For example, bring them over, it was suggested, like bring them for regular visits to the mine and maybe share a little bit about the industry, because like one of the questions asked, here's the same question I have, it's how can we connect them more? Is that something that the industry can do more of, Danielle, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. At one of the boards I was on in one of our mines, actually in Mexico, there was a family day that was held annually where the families were actually invited to come to the mine, go underground. The kids were given sort of like spray paint and kind of crayons, and invited to do art on the wall, and also encourage that discussion around safety, to also really promote safety culture and draw that connection between, children working safely, coming home, to your family safe, and to really raise the awareness. So it achieved in a sense of a multi purpose or objective: one, to continue to enhance safety culture and that awareness in the workforce, and two, that connection of the family, two, where someone spent a great deal of time, and three, to get the kids more actively engaged into the industry. So I think that is a great example, Gary. I've not sort of seen it done in certainly in my experience in a lot of places, but that's something that I think could work quite well.
Gary, I don't know if I can just jump in and
you can always jump in.
That the tours that I take my students on, this is what grabs their attention. When I can get young people in my lab, high school students working in the lab, microwaving rocks, coming down to the pilot plant, when people see what we're doing, they're excited. So I think this is a really good point that Daniella makes: engaging more with the community, getting people in at all levels to engage with us, and seeing all the super cool stuff that we're doing.
Yeah, no, Siri, I see you nodding your head. Is that something that you concur as well?
It's hard to disagree. I keep saying I'm going back to school and I want Erin to be my teacher.
Yeah.
I think another way of doing it is also reverse engineering the solution, something I'm very passionate about. So we all see the pit and the hole, and no matter how we draw the picture, there is a hole. If you look at the outcomes and you look at the footprints and the impacts that are getting smaller and more limited, and some of the things that are done, you're talking about how to store, for example, solar power, and building bigger batteries and more efficient batteries, and how, so that's not a mining engineer, that's not a lawyer, that is truly a different part of perhaps the robotics or process engineer, chemical, or I don't even know which area. Talking about smart mining and all the ramifications of smart mining, but also how when you use, and I'm working currently with a client doing this, is building power generated by a solar farm to avoid load shedding if it was tied to the normal grid. So that keeps going very nicely. But the excess power generated actually goes to the community, to the surrounding community. And when this client disappears one day, whether it's 20, 25 years, that plant will remain in place. They will have trained people out of secondary into trades or perhaps even higher education with the help of local academia to manage and run that solar plant so that that community can have more housing, better power, internet, what have you. If that mine wasn't there, and in this case it's producing nickel, that would not happen. So there are huge ramifications. That's what I'm talking about, the full value chain of mining. It's zooming out and looking at all the impacts and looking at the outcomes and then reverse engineering rather than always showing or talking about that hole in that pit. So to the person who asked a very relevant question, you know, we're all in mining and of course we're all converted. Can non-miners talk about it? I would suggest that people from those communities or from the finance world or from Erin's classes talk to that broader audience in terms that are simple. Again, not quarterly results and all the technology that goes with it and not how many dollars or ounces, but truly some of the broader developments they're tied into. And many mining companies, again, and I can certainly name them, but it's easy to Google, are doing some amazing jobs around the world, in the Arctic, in Canada, and South America, and Africa. But we just have to keep working on it. If we want to get rid of coal, we want to get rid of oil and gas. There are not a lot of alternatives, back to Erin's comment. So we need to be transparent and we need to build trust and get the world respect. And yeah.
Yeah, and there's a couple of questions here, and we've touched on it a little bit. It's like non-mining people speaking up for mining. And Siri, you touched on that a little bit about Shane's question about getting social media influencers or something. Danielle, what are your thoughts on that about, you know, does it make sense to get, I don't know, a celebrity or something, or is that, what do you think of that non-mining kind of public trying to say, hey, mining's not that bad, look at this, that sort of approach? Any thoughts sort of on that?
I'm gonna say I don't think it can hurt. You know, we haven't done a good job ourselves, I don't think, at making those you know, those promotions. I've seen a couple of campaigns that maybe with a personality might get even greater penetration. The zinc industry has made that connection around the uses of zinc in as a supplement, and in talked about zinc deficiencies, and so the use of it, other than maybe just pointing to an input into steel or something like that. I think Tech was running a campaign during the pandemic around the use of copper as a surface to sort of prevent transmission or so on. So I thought those were quite elegant ways to pivot and also make that connection between what we do and things that you use in everyday life. Some of the images that I've seen some use, again, where I've heard positive feedback and reaction, have been around the remediation. And I see, I'm just picking up on another comment here in the chat, that that one of the image that seems to stick with people when they think about mining are these holes in the ground, or the tailings facilities that we leave behind, or maybe that we're not as quick to remediate. or may take generations to remediate because mines last generations. But seeing the before and after of an open pit that has been remediated, or seeing the before and after of a tailings facility that has been remediated, I think that's something else, or a river that where maybe you go back into an old mine and there is a lot of environmental damage that has been left behind as a result of whoever was there the last time not doing a good job cleaning it up, but someone coming in and the gold price is now 1,800, not 250, and all of a sudden you're drilling below the old mine and you have a new mine. And as part of that, kind of doing the cleanup, those images are quite striking and have, you know, always strike a positive note with our stakeholders. So I think those are, you know, some other images that I think we can use to continue to demonstrate that, you know, we are doing better than maybe we were doing in the past from an environmental perspective.
Oh, thank you, Danielle. Erin, one of the questions kind of popping up from Gasper is, he makes a good point. He says, I mean, and we've talked about, well, Siri and I had this conversation a few days ago. Remember that, Siri, where we were talking about if you take away all the metal, you take away their phone, is that your Ford? You'll take away that, you kind of strip with nothing. But cognitively, not everybody kind of sort of thinks that way. And what Gasper is suggesting is, why don't we share that or show that? And I think there are some nonprofit organizations in Canada kind of looking at having demonstration sites where people can go and they can like in science centers and that sort of thing, that this is what mining provides to you. Erin, what are your thoughts on that? Why don't we do more of this sort of thing to kind of link, you know, this metal water bottle to everyday life and where it comes from?
I mean, I think we do to a certain extent. Like I'm involved with several museums that have like the Ingenium in Ottawa. If you haven't been there, really great, right? There's exhibits on women in mining. It's fantastic. Love it. If you haven't been there, go. There, a lot of this stuff exists. Gary, when we were chatting, you mentioned that your son felt that the mining industry wasn't authentic, right? In the way that we present ourselves, that we, so I think we're telling the story, we're trying to telling the story, but it's to a large extent falling on deaf ears. People aren't paying attention, they're not listening. So I'm not sure, even if we put like billboards on the Gardner that said, you need metal for your phone, or your electric car, or your hydrogen car, or whatever, I'm not sure the message would really get through. There's so much information. What I find works really well is to get people, like to engage directly with people and to get them to think critically. Like I've really loved some of these challenges that have been out there at various levels. So there's student challenges where a company puts out a problem, student teams have to come up with a new solution and there's a real prize. There's, you know, we go back to the Gold Corp challenge. How awesome was that? Let's put our company, like talk about transparency, Siri. This is our data, this is our problem, help us solve it. And there's a real prize for you at the end. The Crush It challenge. I like ways to get people to think about.
Maybe we talk about it at the convention next year. Maybe,
right? Let's get some real money on the table, some real prizes, and bring people in from outside. Because I mentioned the tech centers, that's the old way. The new way is to engage with startups and get people to bring in their ideas and to you know, seed that outside. So I think that's more of an active way of doing it, get people to actually think about it and be totally transparent, as opposed to just saying, look, this is important and you need us. Because it's falling on deaf ears.
Singer, we can have, you know, on TV. That, I mean,
I think it's got to be a multifaceted approach. I don't want to say like mass communication is not going to work. I think it has to come from both sides, but critical thinking, get people to actually engage and analyze the data and say, you know what, you have skills that we need. Is a positive way to do it.
Yeah. So Danielle, Siri, any comments about that more engagement, practical from the industry, engaging the public to come up with ideas? What do you think of that?
Go, Danielle, you first.
I think that's a great idea, and I think that plays to the diversity and engaging not just other folks in our industry or other folks in mining engineering, but on a broader scope and on a broader level. because I do continue to think that there are things in other industries that we could leverage in our own. At the end of the day, you know, I don't know that we need to reinvent the wheel on some of these things, and all sorts of other things, including sensors, robotics. You know, again, I go back to some of the examples, like how many packages does FedEx move, or how does Amazon, you know, deal with their supply chain, et cetera. Again, I think that's a lot more sophistication goes into that than making sure you've got a robust supply chain for, you know, for your mine. Not to make, you know, again, so I think engaging with other industries and drawing from other industries and trying to draw other talent into our own industry, and being open to that, right? At the end of the day, we need, well, someone made the comment around focusing on capabilities, and I think the pandemic has really driven home that none of us really had a playbook to turn to say, well, you know, I have 15 years of experience in dealing with X, and therefore, you know, you should hire me. We all drew from capabilities, from flexibility, adaptability, resilience, health and safety. That's part of our values, and we adapted to it. So therefore, if we as an industry could do that, surely an individual coming from somewhere else that's not doesn't necessarily have a technical background can add great value to our industry. So I think again, I think we are continuing to be more and more open to hiring for capabilities rather than 15 years of underground mining experience as an engineer.
Siri, did you want to add to that?
Just maybe the only word to add to that list that Daniella mentioned is agility. The industry has the ability, the proven capacity to be agile and to react. Case in point, COVID, and we're all, you know, the industry has done well, and not because we did it over and above everybody's head, but we came together and we found the solutions to survive and improve, because we had to. So again, that zoom out, that who's done it better, dare to think outside of the box, dare to challenge knowledge, go and go to the universities, to academia, do the pitch battles. The kids want to, they love it. They, you know, and it's not just the kids, kids being younger than 50. But you know, yeah. Nothing else to add except that Danielle and Erin are really inspiring. So thanks for bringing us all together, Gary.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Gary, do you mind if I break in? I just want to
was
make
just
sure.
going to say, yes, jump in.
This has been a fascinating discussion. I thank you all for being part of it and sharing your thoughts and insights. I just wanted to make sure we get to one more question in the list here, because you do have a lot of questions. You've answered a lot of them already. But let's do one more. Given today's culture, are there any advocates willing to speak positively about mining who are not part of the industry, since those commentators would be labeled as untrustworthy and biased? Who will be willing to speak positively about mining that isn't already in mining?
Elon Musk.
Jeff Bezos. but beyond, you know, James Bond, I mean, Daniel Craig, more seriously, well, he couldn't do all the funky things he does. And just look at how DHL used the Bond movie. I mean, who would have ever thought of delivery and James Bond in the same ad? And yet they've done it brilliantly. So why can't we be inspired that same way about those kinds of putting together innocuous partners? But you know, somebody who's had open heart surgery on a heart and lung machine will tell you that without, again, to Daniella's comment, the copper, the nickel, the graphite, the scandium that goes into those tiny pieces of equipment that help people survive, talk to them. Talk to those kids who's, you know, right now, the sick kids have got a great campaign. Without any of the minerals that come out of the ground, those kids don't have any chance. And yet with all of those minerals, so those are our champions, because we do make a difference. We do better. We just have to get them to talk. doctors, nurses, back to the copper. You know, who knew that copper does not transmit any kind of virus? You don't have to clean it, shine it. It doesn't transmit anything. So, you know, we have to think outside of the box and go to where our successes are and get them to talk and do that DHL James Bond thing that I think is pretty cool and funky with some kids.
Well, great. Thank you to all of the panelists and to Gary for moderating that fantastic session.